Hello, I think I'm live. We're going to see here. I have uh, I have a Zoom screen up in front of me right at the moment. Let's see here. Yes, I am live on Facebook. Welcome back to to Storytime Classics Live here on Zoom, produced by Southwest Shakespeare Company, and I am your host, Beau Heckman. Kelly Nicole is taking the week off to prep for our next big project that she is going to be directing that we're very excited about, and expect an announcement coming very soon about our next project with Storytime Classics Live. This week, we'll be moving into the Grimm Fairy Tales, and that's very exciting. Today we'll be doing, let me bring this up here. Today we'll be doing The Frog King, or Iron Heinrich. We'll also be doing Cat and Mouse in Partnership. And our last story for the day is a classic, Cinderella. And I will talk about that briefly before reading that one. It is so deep in its history and so ancient, actually, that I could fill an entire episode with just the facts on Cinderella alone. But we're going to really focus on the story today. I'm going to give a little bit of a brief history of it, and I think it will be very interesting. And hopefully I can swing back around and cover this topic again and just expand on a lot of these stories, because there is a lot of deep history to them all. So sit back, relax, enjoy, swing from the ceiling if so, and just enjoy and escape into the Grimm Fairy Tales. A little bit of a disclaimer before we start, actually. And yes, Chaplin, my dog is reminding me. Chaplin, okay, I'm told I should really introduce him. Much like Oreo and Nicole will be back next week. This is Chaplin. Chaplin, say hello. Hello. Okay. Go down now. Okay, there you go. So a little bit of a disclaimer before we begin here. Some of the imagery in the Grimm Fairy Tales is a little different from what we commonly know from the Disney products of the time. They're a little more graphic, a little gory sometimes, so a little warning to our younger viewers or those sensitive that this is more of a PG-13 kind of thing. Just follow along, and hopefully it's not too much for you to take. So we hope you really enjoy this. It's done with tongue-in-cheek, I believe. They had a very dark sense of humor, and we'll just experience it together, because a lot of these I'm reading for the first time myself, and so we're going on that journey together. So again, sit back, relax, swing from the ceiling if that's what you like, and just enjoy these stories. And we'll be beginning with The Frog King, or Iron Heinrich, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. In olden times, when wishing still did some good, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful, but the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, who indeed has seen so much, marveled every time it shone upon her face. In the vicinity of the king's castle, there was a large, dark forest, and in this forest, beneath an old linden tree, there was a well. In the heat of the day, the princess would go out to the forest and sit on the edge of the cool well. To pass the time, she would take a golden ball, throw it into the air, and then catch it. It was her favorite plaything. Now, one day it happened that the princess's golden ball did not fall into her hands, that she held up high, but instead it fell to the ground and rolled right into the water. The princess followed it with her eyes, but the ball disappeared, and the well was so deep that she could not see its bottom. Then she began to cry. She cried louder and louder, and she could not console herself. As she was thus lamenting, someone called out to her, "What is the matter with you, princess? Your crying could turn a stone to pity." She looked around to see where the voice was coming from, and saw a frog who had stuck its thick, ugly head out of the water. "Oh, it's you, old water splashers," he said. "I'm crying because my golden ball has fallen into the well." "Be still and stop crying," answered the frog. "I can help you, but what will you give me if I bring back your plaything?" "Whatever you want, dear frog," she said. "My clothes, my pearls, my precious stones, and even the golden crown that I am wearing." The frog answered, "I don't want your clothes, your pearls, and precious stones, nor your golden crown. But if you will love me and accept me as a companion and a playmate, and let me sit next to you at your table, and eat from your golden plate, and drink from your cup, and sleep in your bed, if you will promise this to me, then I'll dive down and bring your golden ball back to you." "Oh, yes," she said. "I promise all of that to you if you will just bring the ball back to me." But she thought, "What is this stupid frog trying to say? He just sits here in the water with his own kind and croaks. He cannot be a companion to a human." As soon as the frog heard her say yes, he stuck his head under and dove to the bottom. He paddled back up a short time later with the golden ball in his mouth and threw it onto the grass. The princess was filled with joy, and when she saw her beautiful plaything once again, she picked it up and ran off. "Wait, wait," called the frog. "Take me along. I cannot run as fast as you." But what did it help him that he croaked out after her as loudly as he could? She paid no attention to him, but instead hurried home and soon forgot the poor frog, who had to return again to his well. The next day the princess was sitting at the table with the king and the people of the court, and was eating from her golden plate when something came creeping up the marble steps. Plip, plop, plip, plop. As soon as it reached the top, there came a knock at the door, and a voice called out, "Princess, youngest, open the door for me." She ran to see who was outside. She opened the door, and the frog was sitting there. Frightened, she slammed the door shut and returned to the table. Excuse me just a moment. The next day, she ran out to see who was outside. She opened the door, and the frog was sitting there. Frightened, she slammed the door shut and returned to the table. The king saw that her heart was pounding and asked, "My child, why are you afraid? Is there a giant outside the door who wants to get you?" "Oh, no," she said. "It's a disgusting frog." "What does the frog want from you?" "Oh, father dear, yesterday when I was sitting near the well in the forest and playing, my golden ball fell into the water. And because I was crying so much, the frog brought it back. And because he insisted, I had promised him that he could be my companion. But I didn't think he could leave this water. But now he's just outside the door and wants to come in." Just then, there came a second knock at the door, and a voice called out, "Youngest daughter of the king, open up the door for me. Don't you know what yesterday you said to me down by the well, youngest daughter of the king? Open up the door for me." The king said, "What you have promised you must keep. Go and let the frog in." She went and opened the door, and then the frog hopped in and followed her up to her chair. He sat there and called out, "Lift me up next to you." She hesitated until finally the king commanded her to do it. When the frog was seated next to her, he said, "Now push your golden plate closer so we can eat together." She did it, but one could see that she did not want to. The frog enjoyed his meal, but for her every bite stuck in her throat. Finally, he said, "I have eaten all I want, and I am tired. Now carry me to your room and make your bed so that we can go to sleep." The princess began to cry and was afraid of the cold frog and did not dare even touch him. And yet, he was supposed to sleep in her beautiful, clean bed. The king became angry and said, "You should not despise someone who has helped you in time of need." She picked him up with 2 fingers, carried him upstairs, and set him in a corner. As she was lying in bed, he came creeping up to her and said, "I am tired, and I want to sleep as well as you do. Pick me up, or I'll tell your father." With that, she became bitterly angry and threw him against the wall with all her might. "Now you will have your peace, you disgusting frog." But when he fell down, he was not a frog, but a prince with beautifully friendly eyes. And he was now, according to her father's will, her dear companion and husband. He told her how he had been enchanted by a wicked witch, and that she alone could have rescued him from the well, and that tomorrow they would go together to his kingdom. Then they fell asleep. The next morning, just as the sun was waking them, a carriage pulled up, drawn by 8 horses. They had white ostrich feathers on their heads and were outfitted with chains of gold. At the rear stood the young king's servant, Faithful Heinrich. Faithful Heinrich had been so saddened by his master's transformation into a frog that he had to place 3 iron bands around his heart to keep it from bursting in grief and sorrow. The carriage was to take the king back to his kingdom. Faithful Heinrich lifted them both inside and took his place at the rear. He was filled with joy over the redemption. They had gone a short distance. The prince heard a crack from behind him, as though something had broken. He turned around and said, "Heinrich, the carriage is breaking apart." "No, my lord, the carriage is not, but one of the bands surrounding my heart that suffered such great pain when you were sitting in the well, when you were a frog." Once again, and then once again, the prince heard cracking sound and thought that the carriage was breaking apart. But it was the bands springing from Faithful Heinrich's heart, because his master was now redeemed and happy. And that's the end. So that's an interesting, that has very, very close ties to a lot of the princess or the girl who discovers the frog who is not everything that he appears to be. So that's another theme very close to the Cinderella story. When I come around to that, I'll be talking further about that one. Our next story will be called Cat and Mouse in Partnership, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. A cat had made the acquaintance of a mouse and had said so much to her about the great love and friendship that he felt for her that at last the mouse agreed, and they should live and keep house together. "But we must make preparations for the winter, or else we shall suffer from hunger," said the cat. "And you, little mouse, cannot venture out anywhere, or in the end you will be caught in a trap." This good advice was followed, and they bought a pot of fat, but they did not know where to store it. Finally, after much consideration, the cat said, "I know of no place where it will be better stored up than the church. No one dares take anything away from there. We will put it beneath the altar and not touch it until we are in need of it." So the pot was stored safely away. But it was not long before the cat took a great longing for it and said to the mouse, "I wanted to tell you, little mouse, that my cousin has brought a little son into the world, and she has asked me to be its godfather. He is white with brown spots, and I am to hold him over the baptismal font. Let me go out today, and you look after the house by yourself." "Yes, yes," answered the mouse. "By all means go.
And if you get anything good to eat, think of me. I would like to drink a drop of sweet red christening wine myself.
All this, however, was untrue. The cat had no cousin and had not been asked to be godfather. He went straight to the church, crept up to the pot of fat, and began to lick at it, and licked off the top of the fat. Then he went for a stroll on the roofs of the town, looked out for opportunities, and then stretched out in the sun, licking his whiskers whenever he thought of the pot of fat. He did not return home until it was evening.
Well, here you are again, said the mouse. You must have had a happy day.
Everything went well, answered the cat.
What name did they give the child?
Asked the mouse. Top off, cried the cat coolly.
Top off, cried the mouse. Well, that's a very odd and uncommon name. Is it a usual one in your family?
What does it matter? Said the cat. It is no worse than Crumb Thief, as your grandchildren are called. Before long, the cat was seized by another fit of longing. He said to the mouse, You must do me a favor, and once more manage the house alone for a day. I have been asked again to be godfather, and since the child has a white ring around its neck, I cannot refuse. The mouse consented. However, the cat crept behind the town wall to the church and devoured half the pot of fat. Nothing tastes as good as that which one eats by himself, he said, and was quite satisfied with his day's work. When he arrived home, the mouse asked,
What name was the child christened with?
Half Gone, answered the cat.
Half Gone? What are you saying? I have never heard that name in all my life. I'll wager it is not in the almanac.
The cat's mouth soon began to water for the delicious goods. All good things comes
in threes,
he said to the mouse. I have been asked to be godfather again. The child is totally black, only it has white paws. Otherwise, it has not a single white hair on its body. This only happens once every few years. You will let me go, won't you?
Top off, half gone,
answered the mouse.
They are such odd names. They make me stop and think.
Here, you sit at home, said the cat, with your dark gray fur and long braid of hair capturing fantasies. That is because you do not go out in the daytime. During the cat's absence, the mouse cleaned the house and put it in order, but the greedy cat devoured all the rest of the fat. One has peace only after everything is eaten up, he said to himself. Well filled and fat, he did not return home until nighttime. The mouse immediately asked what name had been given to the third child. You will not like it either, said the cat. His name is All Gone.
All gone, cried the mouse. That is the most wearisome name of all. I have never seen it in print. All gone. What can that mean?
Then she shook her head, curled herself up, and lay down to sleep. From this time forth, no one invited the cat to be godfather. But when winter had come, and there was no longer anything to be found outside, the mouse thought of their stored food and said, Come, cat, we will go to our pot of fat, which we have stored up for ourselves. It will taste good now. Yes, answered the cat. You will enjoy it as much as you would enjoy sticking that dainty tongue of yours out the window. They set out on their way, but when they arrived, the pot of fat, to be sure, was still in its place, but it was empty.
Alas,
Said the mouse.
now I see what has happened. Now it comes to light. You are a true friend. You hate everything when you were serving as godfather. First top off, then half gone, then be quiet, cried the cat. One more word, and I will eat you too. All gone
Was already on the poor mouse's lips. She had scarcely spoken it before the cat sprang on her, seized her, and swallowed her down. You see, that is the way of the world. Wasn't that the most uplifting ending ever? Seriously, that was a feel-good piece. I'm really inspired now. I just don't know what to do with the rest of my day. I know. Let's let's start talking about Cinderella. Now, this is such an interesting story. It is very, very old. It actually dates back so far as to the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians, about a slave girl who goes on very much the same journey, being a sandal. Things do change over the years, and it's passed along to many different storytellers. Much like Shakespeare, a lot of the stories that we know as Shakespeare existed long before Shakespeare put his pen and his version to it. We just know them today because the Grimm brothers and Shakespeare wrote what I would probably call the for lack of a better term, and you can write and comment on what it is to you, but the iconic version, the version we really think about. Romeo and Juliet existed before Shakespeare's version of Romeo and Juliet. The different names have been changed to protect the innocent, that kind of thing. But it is fascinating how long these stories existed in our folklore and our history until what we would call probably our modern version that we know, and mostly by what Disney has done to it. And I don't get me wrong, I really love the Disney versions, but when you go back and read the source material, it is a little bit of a shock. So let's jump into to Cinderella here in a second. There have been many different takes on Cinderella over the years, and the original story, a wonderful nod was made to the original story in the Stephen Sondheim musical Into the Woods. The stepsisters are doing anything to fit their foot into the slipper, which in the original version is actually made of gold and not glass. Interesting little fact there. And in the Grimm version, they go to great extremes to make their foot fit, and it gets a little gory. So this is part of the warning thing of the PG to PG-13 for younger viewers. It's done with what I think is a lot of dark humor, but it is a little gory, and we'll get to that in a second. But I love the musical Into the Woods for exactly that reason. They embrace sort of the darker aspects of a lot of these stories. And people might be sitting there wondering, well, I don't remember that happening. That's not in the original. It very much is. There has actually been another version of this written in 1997. It is called Ella Enchanted by the author, Gail Carson Levine. Wrote a version of this, Ella Enchanted, Cinderella, Ella being the shorter version of that, for the viewing audience at home, and really has taken a really fun spin on this and given it the girl power kind of spin and set a lot of it on its end. It is a charming story. I highly recommend reading the books, and she's written another one, called Fairest. It's basically the story of Snow White set in the same universe as Ella Enchanted. There's also a prequel story to Ella Enchanted called Ogre Enchanted. So really, these are charming books. I recommend reading them. They're not just for girls. I have had the honor of acting in Ella Enchanted the Musical with a local theater company called Child's Play, and have just had a lovely, lovely time with this beautiful musical adaptation and talking with kids afterwards and with a lovely cast. So please, if you can, it's all in books, as they used to say. So without further ado, let's jump into the original version of Cinderella and see what differences there are. Sit back, relax, enjoy, swing from the ceiling, all of that, and enjoy Cinderella by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. But first, coffee. That's good coffee. A rich man's wife became sick, and when she felt that her end was drawing near, she called her only daughter to her bedside and said, "Dear child, remain pious and good, and then our dear God will always protect you, and I will look down on you from heaven and be near you." With this, she closed her eyes and died. The girl went out to her mother's grave every day and wept. And she remained pious and good. When winter came, the snow spread a white cloth over the grave, and when the spring sun had removed it again, the man took himself another wife. This wife brought 2 daughters into the house with her. They were beautiful, with fair faces, but evil and dark hearts. Times soon grew very bad for the poor stepchild. "Why should that stupid goose sit in the parlor with us?" they said.
"If she wants to eat bread, then she shall have to earn it. Out with this kitchen maid."
They took her beautiful clothes away from her, dressed her in an old gray smock, and gave her wooden shoes.
"Just look at that proud princess, how decked out she is,"
they shouted and laughed as they led her into the kitchen. There she had to do hard work from morning until evening, get up before daybreak, carry water, make the fires, cook, and wash. Besides this, the sisters did everything imaginable to hurt her. They made fun of her, scattered peas and lentils into the ashes for her, so that she had to sit and pick them out again. In the evening, when she had worked herself weary, there was no bed for her. Instead, she had to sleep by the hearth in the ashes, and because she always looked dusty and dirty, they called her Cinderella. One day it happened that the father was going to the fair, and he asked his 2 stepdaughters what he should bring back for them.
"Beautiful dresses,"
said one. "Pearls and jewels," said the other. "And you, Cinderella," he said, "what do you want?" "Father, break off for me the first twig that brushes against your hat on your way home." So he bought beautiful dresses, pearls, and jewels for his 2 stepdaughters. On his way home, as he was riding through a green thicket, a hazel twig brushed against him and knocked off his hat. Then he broke off the twig and took it with him. Arriving home, he gave his stepdaughters the things that they had asked for, and he gave Cinderella the twig from the hazel bush. Cinderella thanked him, went to her mother's grave, and planted the branch on it. And she wept so much that her tears fell upon it and watered it. It grew and became a beautiful tree. Cinderella went to this tree 3 times every day, and beneath it she wept and prayed. A white bird came to the tree every time, and whenever she expressed a wish, the bird would throw down to her what she had wished for. Now it happened that the king proclaimed a festival that was to last 3 days. All the beautiful young girls in the land were invited, so that his son could select a bride for himself. When the two stepsisters heard that they too had been invited, they were in high spirits. They called Cinderella, saying,
"Comb our hair for us, brush our shoes, and fasten our buckles. We are going to the festival at the king's castle."
Cinderella obeyed but wept, because she too would have liked to go to the dance with them. She begged her stepmother to allow her to go.
"You, Cinderella," she said, "you, all covered with dust and dirt, and you want to go to the festival? You have neither clothes nor shoes, and yet you want to dance?"
However, because Cinderella kept asking, the stepmother finally said,
"I have scattered a bowl of lentils in the ashes for you. If you can pick them out again in 2 hours, then you may go with us."
The girl went through the back door to the garden and called out, "You tame pigeons, you turtle doves, and all you birds beneath the sky, come and help me gather. The good ones go into the pot, the bad ones go into your crop." 2 white pigeons came in through the kitchen window, and then the turtle doves, and finally all the birds beneath the sky came whirring and swarming in and lit around the ashes. The pigeons nodded their heads and began to pick, 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 pick. And the others also began to pick, 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 pick. They gathered all the good grains into the bowl. Hardly 1 hour passed before they were finished, and they all flew out again. The girl took the bowl to her stepmother and was happy, thinking that now she would be allowed to go to the festival with them. But the stepmother said,
"No, Cinderella, you have no clothes. You don't know how to dance. Everyone would only laugh at you."
Cinderella began to cry. And then the stepmother said,
"You may go if you are able to pick 2 bowls of lentils out of the ashes for me in 1 hour."
Thinking to herself,
"She will never be able to do that."
the girl went through the back door into the garden and called out, "You tame pigeons, you turtle doves, and all you birds beneath the sky, come and help me to gather. The good ones go into the pot, the bad ones go into your crop." 2 white pigeons came in through the window, and then the turtle doves, and finally all the birds beneath the sky came whirring and swarming in and lit around the ashes. The pigeons nodded their heads and began to pick, 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 and the others also began to pick, 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 pick. They gathered all the good grains into the bowls. Before a half an hour had passed, they were finished, and they all flew out again. The girl took the bowls to her stepmother and was happy, thinking that now she would be allowed to go to the festival with them. But the stepmother said,
"It is no use. You are not coming with us, for you have no clothes and you don't know how to dance. We would be ashamed of you."
With this, she turned her back on Cinderella and hurried away with her 2 proud daughters. Now that no one else was at home, Cinderella went to her mother's grave beneath the hazel tree and cried out, "Shake and quiver, little tree. Throw gold and silver down to me." Then the bird threw a gold and silver dress down to her, and slippers embroidered with silk and silver. She quickly put on the dress and went to the festival. Her stepsisters and stepmother did not recognize her. They thought she must be a foreign princess, for she looked so beautiful in the golden dress. They never once thought it was Cinderella, for they thought that she was sitting at home in the dirt, looking for lentils in the ashes. The prince approached her, took her by the hand, and danced with her. Furthermore, he would dance with no one else. He never let go of her hand, and whenever anyone else came up and asked to dance, he would say, "She is my dance partner." She danced until evening, and then she wanted to go home. But the prince said, "I will go along and escort you," for he wanted to see whom the beautiful girl belonged. However, she eluded him and jumped into the pigeon coop. The prince waited for her father till her father came, and then he told him that the unknown girl had jumped into the pigeon coop. The old man thought, could it be Cinderella? He had them bring an axe and pick so that he could break the pigeon coop apart, but no one was inside. When they got home, Cinderella was lying in the ashes, dressed in her dirty clothes. A dim little oil lamp was burning in the fireplace. Cinderella had quickly jumped down from the back of the pigeon coop and had run to the hazel tree. There, she had taken off her beautiful clothes and laid them on the grave, and the bird had taken them away again. Then, dressed in her gray smock, she had returned to the ashes in the kitchen. The next day, when the festival began anew, and her parents and her stepsisters had gone again, Cinderella went to the hazel tree and said, "Shake and quiver, little tree. Throw gold and silver down to me." Then the bird threw down an even more magnificent dress than on the preceding day. When Cinderella appeared at the festival in this dress, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The prince had waited until she came, then immediately took her by the hand and danced only with her. When others came and asked her to dance with them, he said, "She is my dance partner." When evening came, she wanted to leave, and the prince followed her, wanting to see into which house she went. But she ran away from him and into the garden behind the house. A beautiful tall tree stood there, on which hung a most magnificent pears. She climbed as nimbly as a squirrel into the branches, and the prince did not know where she had gone. He waited until her father came, and then said to him, "The unknown girl has eluded me, and I believe she has climbed up into the pear tree." The father thought, could it be Cinderella? He had an axe brought to him and cut down the tree, but no one was in it. When they came to the kitchen, Cinderella was lying in the ashes as usual, for she had jumped down from the other side of the tree and had taken the beautiful dress to the bird in the hazel tree and had put on her gray smock. On the third day, when her parents and sisters had gone away, Cinderella went again to her mother's grave and said to the tree, "Shake and quiver, little tree. Throw gold and silver down to me." This time, the bird threw down to her a dress that was more splendid and more magnificent than any she had yet had, and the slippers were of pure gold. When she arrived at the festival in this dress, everyone was so astonished they did not know what to say. The prince danced only with her, and whenever anyone else told her to dance, he would say, "She is my dance partner." When evening came, Cinderella wanted to leave, and the prince tried to escort her, but she ran away from him so quickly that he could not follow her. The prince, however, had set a trap. He had the entire stairway smeared with pitch. When she ran down the stairs, her left slipper stuck in the pitch. The prince picked it up. It was small and dainty and of pure gold. The next morning, he went with it to the man and said to him, "No one shall be my wife except for the one whose foot fits this golden shoe." The two sisters were happy to hear this, for they had pretty feet. With her mother standing by, the older one took the shoe into her bedroom to try it on. She could not get her big toe into it, for the shoe was too small for her. Then her mother gave her a knife and said, "Cut off your toe. When you are queen, you will no longer have to go on foot." The girl cut off her toe, forced her foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the prince. He took her on his horse as his bride and rode away with her. However, they had to ride past the grave, and there on the hazel tree sat the two pigeons crying out, "Rook-de-goo, rook-de-goo, there's blood in the shoe. The shoe is too tight. This bride is not
right.
Then he looked at her foot and saw how the blood was running from it. He turned his horse around and took the false bride home again, saying that she was not the right one, and that the other sister should try the shoe. She went into her bedroom and got her toes into the shoe all right, but her heel was too large. Then her mother gave her a knife and said,
Cut off a piece of your heel. When you are queen, you will no longer have to go on foot.
The girl cut a piece off her heel, forced her foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went out to the prince. He took her on his horse as his bride and rode away with her. When they passed the hazel tree, the two pigeons were sitting in it, and they cried out,
Rook-de-goo, rook-de-goo, there's blood in the shoe. The shoe is too tight. This bride is not right.
He looked down at her foot and saw how the blood was running out of her shoe, and how it had stained her white stocking all red. Then he turned his horse around and took the false bride home again. This is not the right one either, he said. Don't you have another daughter?
No, said the man. There is only a deformed little Cinderella from my first wife. But she cannot possibly be the bride.
The prince told him to send for her, but the mother answered,
No, no, she is much too dirty. She cannot be seen.
But the prince insisted on it, and they had to call Cinderella. She first washed her hands and face clean, and then went and bowed down before the prince, who gave her the golden shoe. She sat down on a stool, pulled her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe, and put it into the slipper. It fit perfectly. When she stood up, the prince looked into her face, and he recognized the beautiful girl who he had danced with him. He cried out, She is my true bride. The stepmother and the two stepsisters were horrified and turned pale with anger. The prince, however, took Cinderella onto his horse and rode away with her. As they passed the hazel tree, the two white pigeons cried out,
Rook-de-goo, rook-de-goo, no blood's in the shoe. The shoe's not too tight. This bride is right.
After they had carried this out, they both flew down and lit on Cinderella's shoulders, one on the right, the other on the left, and remained sitting there. When the wedding with the prince was to be held, the two false sisters came, wanting to gain favor with Cinderella and to share her good fortune. When the bridal couple walked into the church, the older sister walked on their right side and the younger on their left side. And the pigeons picked out one eye from each of them. Afterwards, as they came out of the church, the older one was on the left side and the younger one was on the right side. And then the pigeons pecked out the other eye from each of them. And thus, for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness as long as they lived. Thank you very much. Apologies for any times I was tongue twisted today. These are very interesting stories, and they were a lot of fun to read. Come back tomorrow for more of the Grimm Fairy Tales, and we will explore this together. Also, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please consider making a donation to Southwest Shakespeare Company. In these really, really dark times, it's very important that we support the arts. In the end, that'll be what conveys our legacy. So please, if you can, please give what you can, or if you can give generously, please give generously. If you can't, we completely understand. Anything is appreciated. But please go to www.swshakespeare.org and please give a donation to Southwest Shakespeare Company. We thank you for joining us today for Storytime Classics Live. Please join us again tomorrow. I am Beau Heckman, and I'll see you again later. Have a great day.